Good day, my dear students. I'm going to discuss with you about the market demand, market supply, and market equilibrium. But before that, I want you to get your tablets and open your Week 3, Module 3 of Applied Economics. Okay, do it now. As I count 1 to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's start. After our discussions, we will be able to state the law of demand and supply and define market equilibrium. We can also explain the law of demand and supply and illustrate how equilibrium price and quantity are determined. And we can also discuss and explain the factors affecting demand and supply. Then apply the principles of demand and supply to illustrate how prices of commodities are determined. And last but not the least, we can also analyze how demand and supply forces can affect the value of the Philippine peso about foreign currencies. And now, let's proceed to our lesson for today, which is about market demand, market supply, and market equilibrium. By the way, what is a market? A market is an interaction between the buyers and the sellers of trading or exchange. It is where the consumer buys and the seller sells. Demand is the willingness of a consumer to buy a commodity at a given price. And supplies refers to the quantity of goods that a seller is willing to offer for sale. Equilibrium, on the other hand, is a state in which market supply and demand balance each other, from the word equilibrium or equal. So when it is in its equilibrium state, of course, the prices of that particular goods or services is or become stable, diba? Generally, an oversupply of goods and services causes prices to go down. So, if this particular product has so much quantity, from what is being demanded in the market, of course, tendency is the price of that particular goods will go down. So, just like for example, diba, before there is scarcity of face masks, diba, and face shields. Have you noticed na grabe, super kamahal ang mga face mask, ang boxes before, grabe kamahal, ang per piece, grabe kamahal, hasta ang face shield. I even bought it for 150. But now, what have you observed, diba? Tag 25 na lang, tag 15 ang face shields, and ang face mask, tag 90 na lang ang box, diba? Why is it so? Of course, simply because there is already a mass production. So, the goods are more than what the people demanded. So that's the reason why the prices also goes down. Market system is a powerful tool for the allocation because the change in price and from market transaction create incentives and disincentives on buyers and sellers to address disparities between demand and supply. The instrument of allocation is the market price determined by the interactions of the buyer and the seller in the market. What really determines the market price is the interactions of the buyers and the seller in the market. How does the buyer and seller interact on that particular product or services. So diha i-determine ang price of that particular product. To start our lesson proper about market demand, market supply, and market equilibrium, let us define first what is demand. Okay, demand refers to the amount of some goods and services consumers are willing to purchase at each price. So, Demand. For example, in your household, how much is your family demand for a particular product? For example, most of us, or if not all, wants to have bread for breakfast. For example, pandesal in your home. If you are 5 in the family and each one of you is allocated to have 2 pandesals. So, how many pandesals are you going to buy? Kung you are 5 in the family. So, di ba? 5 times 2 equals 10. So, your demand for that particular pandesal is 10 pieces. So, this is the amount of pandesal you are going to purchase. You are willing to purchase at a particular price. Demand is based on needs and wants. A consumer may be able to differentiate between a need and a want, but from an economist perspective, they are the same. But a need refers to the basic needs of human beings, diba? Needs refers to the goods and services that a person cannot live without. For example, food, clothing, shelter. So those are needs. While wants, on the other hand, these are the things that we can still be able to live without. For example, mga televisions and mga other things nga dili jud kayo siya ingon necessary, for the human existence, dili jud kayo siya ingon necessary. So these are the luxury goods and other goods nga we can still live without them. So each good and services has an equivalent price. What a buyer pays for a unit of a specific goods or services is called price. The total number of units purchased at the price is called the quantity demanded. And in your module, you can be able to find a table that shows the quantity demanded at each price, and that is called a demanding schedule. A demand curve shows the relationship between price and quantity demanded on a graph. So there you can find the equivalent price of this particular goods, as the demand goes high or as the demand goes down. So makita nimo kung unsa ang effect sa price depending sa demand of that particular goods. Next is the law of supply and demand. The law of supply and demand explains the interaction between the seller and the product and the buyers. It shows the relationship between the availability of a particular product and the demand for that product has on its price. So, di ba? Usually, the price of that product depends on the demand, the higher the demand, the higher the price, diba? The lower the demand, also the price becomes low. Just like, for example, the one that I told you earlier about that face mask and face shields, diba? Before, the price of the face mask and the face shields are very, very high, and we can really say that there's scarcity, okay, we cannot just buy it anytime in the market, we cannot buy it anywhere, kay grabe wala siya stocks. So limited ang stocks, there is a higher demand but the production is very low. So muna diha ni enter ang scarcity of that kind of particular goods, as well as the services of our medical practitioners, nurses and doctors. Because of the pandemic, grabe, it goes high gyud kay daghan ang na affected sa COVID niya. Dili maka-accommodate tanan ang mga hospitals. Now I want you to refer to your modules in your tablets, and go to page 7, the law of demand. Using the assumptions of ceteris paribus, which means all other related variables except those that are being studied at the moment and are held constant, there is an inverse relationship between the price of good and the quantity demanded. Quantity demanded of that particular good. So, the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded, and vice versa. So, as you can see, no, there's a graph there, no, in your tablet, no, you can see at page 7. The horizontal is the price, while the vertical one represents the price and the horizontal one represents the quantity. So, as you can see, as the demand curve is always downward sloping due to the law of diminishing marginal utility. So, as that price goes down, the quantity of that particular product goes up. So, muna siya, no? The amount of goods that buyers purchase at a higher price is fewer because as the price of that goods goes up, the opportunity cost of buying the goods is less. Consumer will avoid buying the product. So, common sense, di ba? Kung mahal ni siya nga produkto, muubos yun na siya ang demand, ana. So, not all people will be able to afford to buy that particular product. So, muna siya kung mahal, ang demand sa quantity, muubos yun siya. Pero kung muubosad ang presyo, nga particular product, so, ang demand sa niya, musaka. So, na siya opposite, no? Opposite. For example, if the price of a video game drops, the demand for that games may increase as more as people wants the game. So, dili lang kana particular product. Unsa nga product nga feeling ninyo saleable kay karong panahon na, of course, kaning alcohol, no? For example, ang alcohol. Kung mahal kayo ang alcohol, syempre, people will not buy it. So, they will look for alternatives. So, instead of using alcohol, so, might as well na lang, manghugas na sa itong kamot, no? Let's buy na lang sabon, kay barato pa, dugay mahulot. Whereas, kung ang alcohol, muubos, so, umubos na ang price sa alcohol, so, mapalit na lang ang tawag alcohol, kay ang alcohol, dali naman siya, hindi nakakinanglan, magmita pa kag kahugasan, anak niya. Diretso na lang kagbubusin mong kamot. So, muna siya. Magdepende gid siya ang demand, nga product will depend on its price. Kaya nga naman, of course, people will also consider their income. Kay naman dyan tayo budget, di man sad pwede nga mo-go tabiyan sa atong budget, kay it's not the only thing nga atong kinahanglang paliton. There are other things for our survival, di ba? So, there are other things nga mas important than that. So, did you get it? Did you understand? Sa law of supply, law of demand. Law of demand. So, diha, no? The law of demand, mo na siya, the amount of goods that buyer purchase at a higher price is fewer because as the price of goods goes up, the opportunity cost of buying the goods is less because the consumer will avoid buying products with higher price. Why do you think? What are the factors that affect the demand of that particular commodity? Of course, first, the income, di ba? Income should. Kaya asa man di tag makuha og atong ibayad anang particular product. Of course, sa ato ang income or income sa imuhang family, income sa imong mama, imong papa. So, income. What is income? The willingness of a consumer to buy a commodity is influenced by the price of commodity and his or her taste for the commodity. Of course, the capacity to purchase the commodity is influenced by her income. His or her income. Income of the consumer. A higher level of income will give him or her higher capacity to consume, while a lower income will give him limited purchasing power. Of course, no? There's no common sense. Kung daghan ka, dako imong income, dako imong purchasing power. Kung gamay imong income, gamay sad imong purchasing power. Purchasing power is that your ability to buy that particular goods or services at that certain amount, no? Kung dako imong income, so daghan kang mapalit. Kung gamay imong income, so gamay ra sad kang mapalit. So therefore, diha jud mo sulod ang budget. You need to budget according to your purchasing capacity. So kani siya, bisan siguro kamo, you can do budgeting, no? Katong time nga naapa mo'y allowance nga you can go to school, no? Kanang face to face pa ang learning, so tagaan jud mo og allowance sa inyuhang mama or papa, tagaan mo bound. So that way you can have this budgeting, no, sa inyuhang money. So unsa ray purchasing power ang inyong allowance. So you will also see kung unsa ra ang kasyang paliton aning inyuhang allowance. So mo na siya purchasing power sa inyuhang allowance. So kung 100, so you will only buy kutob ra sad sa 100 or less, diba? Next is price of the commodities. Prices of other goods and services may influence the demand of goods and services. Of course, maka-influence jud siya sa kuan ang price sa anang demand anang goods and services, di ba? As what I have said, kung mahal, syempre gamay ra ang maka-afford. Kung barato, of course daghan ang maka-afford. The prices on commodities may affect the demand of a particular good. The influence of related goods is more palpable. For example, if the other goods is a substitute, the increase in the price of the substitute goods may increase the demand for a commodity at hand. Thus, when the price of beef increases, the demand for chicken will increase. If the other goods are a complementary good, a decrease in its price will impact positively on demand for the goods being investigated. For instance, when the price of bread decreases, the demand for butter may increase, since butter and bread may be considered as complementary good. So, nasa maka-affect, no, kung panalitan ang demand sa ang kaning price sa bread, kung daghan kay ang there's mass productions of this particular bread, so muna ilang i-lower ang price kay sa mga daot. So ang impact sa dana kay daghan mamalit aning pan, so naa siya gusto ngita jud kag palaman, so may possibility nga ang katong palaman mo mahal. So muna siya. Then taste or preferences, no? The formation of tastes is influenced by several factors like cultural values, peer pressures, or the power of advertising, no? Of course, sometimes, no, kani advertising, grabe, maka-influence jud ni, no? Pautan na gani, sus, tanang mga bata, kaila jud nag-Jollibee, tungod sa advertising. So, usa sad na siya nga, maka-entice, no, nga, ganahan jud mo ka mo palit ani kay na lami biya kayo, lami kay pag-present ana niya sa advertising, no? Yeah, of course kaning tinujud kaning taste preferences, no, cultural values, peer pressures. Imong mga amiga ganahan ani, bisag di kay ka ganahan ani nga pagkaon kay tungod imong mga amiga ganahan, so lain sad kaayo mura kag ma OP. So muna di man kay ganahan man imong makauban, maganahan na lang sad ka mo na siya peer pressures, no? For example, on the celebration of New Year's Eve, it is customary for families to have brown fruits. Diba? Nakabantay mo nga ini ka ng mga New Year's Eve. Grabe, halit kayo ang mga lingin nga mga fruits, diba? Yeah, i-display na sa inyong mama sa inyong lamisa, no? Gila ganito kabuok 13, diba? 13 pieces na different kinds. No, na kay kana daw siya, it attracts good luck. This tradition increased the demand for fruits during this season. So muna siya, no, makabantay jud ka nga grabe high ang demand. High ang demand ana nga mga prutas during New Year's Eve. So muna siya. Then next is consumer expectations. The expectations of prospects of what will happen to the price. can influence the demand for the commodity. For example, if you believe that rice prices will increase tomorrow, panalitan na mingon, hala kanang sunod ra ba kuno simana or ugma musaka ang kanang kuan, kanang presyo sa bugas. So unsay mahitabo? So ang mga tao magpanik, mangadto dayon sa merkado ug mamalit og daghan kaayo nga bugas. So what will happen? There is an increase in consumption on that particular product on that particular day, no? Di ba? Muna siya, isasad na siya. Then next is the market. The size and characteristics of the market can also be influenced or can be influencing the demand for a commodity. An increasing population can contribute to the expansion of existing markets for various commodities. A lower birth rate coupled with an aging population may alter the composition of demand by shifting the demand toward the needs of the elderly and away from goods and services that target the youth. So what does it mean? It means nga kung this particular community ni dako ang population ani nga community, so taasad ang demand sa mga supplies nga gikinahanglan aning lugara. Then also, for example, kaning sa by age sad kung daghang bata diri, meaning daghan sad ang mga musaka sad ang needs nga gikinahanglan sa mga bata. So kung diri sa daghan sad ang mga senior citizen, so musaka sad ang needs sa mga senior citizen. So mo na siya depende sa unsa ang composition ana nga particular market. Now we're done with demand. So do you have any questions? Did you understand? Okay, let's proceed to the supply. What is supply, by the way? Supply, on the other hand, refers to the quantity of goods that the seller is willing to offer for sale. The supply schedule shows the different quantities the seller is willing to offer for sale. The supply schedule shows the different quantities the seller is willing to sell to different prices. The supply functions shows the dependence of supply on the various determinants that affects it. Supply, it refers to the quantity. So quantity, what do you mean? What comes to your mind when we say quantity? So meaning numbers, no? It refers to numbers. So pila kabuok, no? Ang that particular goods nga willing ibaligya sa seller, no? So, muna siya, ang supply schedule sad, magdepende sad na sa quantities nga gikinahanglan aning particular nga market. Then, kung unsaon sad nimo pagbaligya, no? Depende sad kung diri nga dapita grabe kusog kaayo ang demand ani nga particular product. So, muna murag may possibility nga lahi-lahi ang presyo, no? Kaingon ka kano man ni diri dapita nga dito sa kuan mao lagi ni ang price lagi ubos lagi kanong diri dapita mura siya mahal-mahal lagi lahi lagi ang iyang price naa lagi diferensya. So because lahi-lahi man gud ang demand kung diri nga particular nga lugar daghan ang nag-demand ani, daghan ang mopalit ani, may possibility nga mahal siya. Kung diri nga lugar wala kaayo, so may possibility nga muubos, lower ang price. So assuming that the supply function is given as Q, so 100 plus 5P and is used to determine the quantity supplied to the given prices. Supply can be illustrated using a table or graph. So tanawa sa inyong module, no? Inyong module sa inyong tablet na diha. Page 9. So diha na makita nimo diha ang example, no? Table 2 that shows the quantity supplied at a range of different prices. A supply curve is a graphic illustration of the relationship between price, the vertical axis, which represents the letter Y, and quantity supplied shows On the horizontal axis, which is represented by the letter X, the supply schedule and the supply curve are just two different ways of showing the same information. So, as you can see, no, ang example here is the price of fish per kilo and the supply in kilos, no? So, here in table 2, the supply schedule of Jose for fish in 1 week, diba? As you can see, barato ang price sa isda. So, gamay ra yung gisupply, 200 ra. But as the price of that fish increases, nagkadakusad ang iyahang gisupply sa market. So, pag abot sa 100, no, gikan sa 200 kilos, niabot og 600 kilos. Kay, natag 100 naman ang per kilo sa fish. So, nga naman, because higher quantity nga iyahang i-supply, mas dako ang iyahang income. So, mo na siya, no, ang law of supply, no? The law of supply demonstrates the quantities that will be sold at given price. The higher the price, the higher the quantity supplied and vice versa. So mo na siya, kung magkamahal ni nga produkto, maningkamot siya ka nga daghan kag mabaligya aron dako ang imuhang ginansya, di ba? So mo na siya. Producers supply more at a higher price because selling at a higher quantity at a higher price increases revenue, no? For example, during insecure until this time because of pandemic COVID-19, many people involve themselves in online food delivery. Producers produce more groceries and medical care supplies, sportswear, shoes, and even garden plants. So, iba, nagkabantay mo kaning sa mga tanom. Grabe, before nga wapay pandemic. Grabe, barato na kayo ni mga tanom ma. Pero pagka pandemic time, mga mahal na kayo ang mga tanom. Dili na nimo halos duol niya daghan sad kay ang mga tao nga ni-engage in gardening or kaning pagplant og mga ornamental plants kay dako kay siya og kita mo na siya, no? Before nga dili kayo barato ra mga tanom, wala ra kay ang mga tao nagsigig pananom. Sa time sa pandemic nga grabe taas ang demand niya, nagkamahal sad, amo na sad nga nananom sad sila daghan kay aron mabaligya nila sa mahal nga presyo ug makakuha sila og greater revenue or profit, diba? So, did you understand the law of supply? Okay. Now, let's go to the factors affecting supply of a commodity. Of course, first is the price of production inputs. The production of any commodity will require two major inputs: intermediate inputs or raw materials and factor inputs. Then, intermediate inputs refers to the materials, including raw materials, that are still going to be processed or transformed into higher levels of outputs. The factor inputs are the processing or transforming inputs. Some examples of factor inputs are labor, capital, land, and entrepreneurship. These factors inputs are the ones adding value to the raw materials to the process of production. When the price of these production inputs increases, there will be an increase in the cost of production at every level of production. With the cost of production increase, a given price level, sellers will reduce to quantity supplied at alternative prices. Ano ni siya, guys? Ang raw materials, no? For example, maghimo ka og cotton nga face mask, di ba? Ang raw materials ana is usually the cloth, no? Ang cloth nga gamiton nga himuon og face mask plus ang ang thread, ang hilo nga gamiton sa pagtahi. So, muna siya ang raw materials. Whereas the factor inputs, muna to siya ang gikinahanglan para unsaon na siya pag-produce. So, of course, ang labor, no, katong mutahi. Then, ang gamito niya sa pagtahi, di ba? Ang gamito niya sa pagtahi mo na ang makina. And of course, also, the capital. Kay, wala kay capital, paliton man na nimo ang cloth. So, mo na siya. And, of course, ang lugar, kung asa ka pwede mo tahi. And, of course, the entrepreneur. So, mo na siya class ha, ang raw materials katong gamiton para himuon nga produkto. Then ang kanang the factor inputs muna siya ang of course the capital ang atong gamiton nga money para ipalit ana nga raw materials and also the labor. So ang mutahi, for example sa face mask, cotton face mask, then also ang makina and the place ug asa tahion muna siya ang mga factor inputs. So mo add up na siya sa cost ana nga face mask. So kung mumahal ang labor, syempre mumahal sad na ang face mask. Kung mumahal ang materials, so mumahal sad din, magdepende ang price plus ang ilaha pang profit ana nga ilang i-add up, no? The next is taxes. Business establishments are required to pay a number of taxes to various levels of government. It is a monetary expense on the part of the firms. The payment of taxes can be considered as part of the cost of production. So, included sa daang taxes na bayaran, no, to produce that product or to sell firms. The payment of taxes can be considered as part of the cost of production, di ba? As what I have said, although taxes are not factor inputs nor raw materials, they are still considered as part of the operating a business. Thus, an increase in sales tax, real estate tax, and other business taxes can increase the cost of supplying a commodity. This may discourage the sellers from increasing their supply of a commodity in the market. So, isa sa na siya ka-factor, no, ang taxes sa pag-determine kung pila ang selling price ana nga product. Next is the technology. Some firms may use labor-intensive technology if the cost of the labor is relatively cheap. On the other hand, firms may use a capital-intensive technology. If wages are very high, improvements in the technology used by some firms can lower their production costs and make their firm more competitive. A lower cost may encourage these firms to supply more of the commodity since they can sell it at a reduced price. So, of course, kanang technology, if there's a way nga they can be able to produce this kind of product at minimal cost. So, diba, for example ron, kanang makina nga paspas, daghan siya og mahal siya pero daghan siya ma-produce, so mugo sila ana. Kaysa hinay nga makina niya, daghan sila paliton aning makina, hinay niya daghan sang labor, daghan sa ang ilang ihar para mo trabaho. Whereas kung kani mahalon siya nga makina but paspas ang production, so mugo sila ato para they can be able to sell their products at a lower price. Next is expectations. The expectations of anticipation of what will happen in the price of the commodity can also influence the amount supplied in the market. If there is an expectation that rice prices will increase next season, this may encourage farmers to plant more rice next season. The expectation of a higher price next season can discourage the rice dealers from selling the rice currently. Some of them will hoard so they can sell in the future with higher returns. So, muna no, usually makaingon ta nga i-hoard, makadungog mo ana, murag i-hoard ang rice kay labi nag maka hearing sila nga next month mo saka ang presyo sa bugas. So, muna dili kayo nila ipagawas ang mga bugas nila i-dispose karong buwana. So, next month na kay makakuha man sila og greater profits. Next is how do we supply the demand? How do supply and demand create an equilibrium price? So, equilibrium price or market clearing price is the price at which the product can sell all the units he wants to produce and the buyer can buy all the units he wants. Supply and demand are balanced or in equilibrium. So, meaning equal, di ba? Equal. So, ang supply ug ang demand, equal na siya. Enough nga makasupply, enough makasupply sa demand ani nga particular product. So, for example, naay nagkinahanglan og 100 ka backpacks. So, Musad na ang iyang i-produce 100 ka backpack. So equal siya, no? Equal ang iyahang demand sa gi-supply. So supply and demand are balanced in an equilibrium. The demand curve is downward sloping. This is due to the law of diminishing marginal utility. The supply curve is a vertical line. Over time, the supply curve slopes upward. The more supplier expects to be able to charge, the more they will be willing to produce and bring to market. In the equilibrium point, the two slopes will intersect. The market price is sufficient to induce suppliers to bring to the market that same quantity of goods that consumer will be willing to pay at that price. So, diba? As what I have said, equilibrium takes place kung ang demand will equal the supply. So, next is market equilibrium. When the supply and the demand curves intersect, the market is in equilibrium. This is where the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied are equal. The corresponding price is the equilibrium price or the market clearing price. The quantity is the equilibrium quantity. The intersections of supply and demand determines the equilibrium price and quantity. The equilibrium occurs where the quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied. If the price is below the equilibrium level, then the quantity demanded will exceed the quantity supplied. So, kung mudaw ng price sa equilibrium level, musaka sad ang iyahang demand, no? Exist demand or a shortage will exist. So, kung mubarato siya, most likely, musaka ang demand, so there will be a shortage of that product or shortage of supply. If the price is above the equilibrium level, however, kung ang price set is musaka beyond the equilibrium level, what will happen? So, the quantity supplied will exceed the quantity demanded. So, mudaghan ang iyahang supply, mudaghan kaysa sa iyahang demand. So, most likely, naa siya inventory. So, mahitabuan ni na yung mga daghang over nga supplies. So, kay ni mahal man siya, so, most probably, mo down ang iyahang sales on that particular product. Or mo down ang demand. So, the quantity supplied will exceed the quantity demanded. Exist supply or a surplus will exist, no, just like what I've said, no, there will be an excess of supply or surplus. In either case, economic pressures will push the price towards the equilibrium level. A change in supply, demand, or both will necessarily change the equilibrium price, quantity, or both. It is highly unlikely that the change in supply and demand perfectly offset one another to the equilibrium remains the same. So, a change in supply, demand, or both will necessarily change the equilibrium price, quantity, or both. It is highly unlikely that the change in supply and demand perfectly offset one another to that equilibrium, so that equilibrium remains the same. That ends our discussion for today. I hope that this discussion was able to help you understand better our lessons. Thank you for watching. Until our next video lessons. Bye!